Marine Lance Corporal Richard Pittman grabs the M60 from the dirt. The previous gunner is dead. Pittman sprints straight into the incoming fire with the heavy weapon in his hands. He shoots from the hip. The deafening roar of the gun clears the jungle at point-blank range. A massive North Vietnamese force pins his platoon down, but Pittman pushes forward. The enemy carries standard assault rifles with 30-round magazines, while the M60 spits out 500 rounds per minute. Pittman burns through the long, heavy belts in mere moments. The platoon survives only because of that single barrel. He later earns the Medal of Honor for holding the line. But military records will soon expose the grim reality behind such heroic citations. The heavy gun eats through the combat load. Then the belt runs dry. Pittman drops the empty M60 and picks up a captured enemy submachine gun. That was the official life expectancy of an M60 gunner after pulling the trigger, according to the infantry training manuals. Pittman survived his close call, but the dry mathematics of combat usually dictated a darker outcome. A standard United States infantry squad relied on 9 or 10 riflemen, but the single machine gun carried the true weight of suppressing a sudden ambush. The operator provided the massive volume of fire necessary to keep the unit alive. The moment the sear dropped, the weapon announced its coordinates to the entire sector. The loud, rhythmic thumping of the heavy rounds instantly drowned out the crack of standard rifles. A concealed enemy sniper would completely ignore the scrambling infantrymen diving into the mud. He watched for the continuous muzzle flashes tearing through the foliage, adjusted his elevation, and centered his sights squarely on the gunner. Just like radiomen, the M60 operator became the immediate priority target in any engagement. Enemy forces concentrated their entire volume of return fire on that specific coordinate. Instructors ordered gunners to change positions constantly and fire from behind hard cover. However, chaotic combat forced men to shoot straight from the hip while moving forward. The sheer size of the weapon made stealth impossible, turning the carrier into a walking bullseye. The gun delivered the firepower required to break an assault, but its design harbored severe structural flaws. 7 seconds. Enemies counted down your short lifespan, but the gun fought you too. A quick-change barrel sounds great, yet swapping it required thick asbestos gloves. Otherwise, metal stripped your bare skin off. Firing continuous bursts generated immense heat. The steel exceeded 500 degrees Celsius. You had to swap it fast. Engineers made a fatal design choice. The front sight sat directly on the barrel. The heavy folding bipod attached there too. The manual promised a rapid, seamless swap. Reality proved them wrong. You needed that bulky asbestos construction glove or a random wet piece of cloth. The gunner grabbed the stiff locking lever. He yanked the red-hot steel free. The bipod fell away right with it. The whole front end simply detached. The weapon crashed down into the dirt. Zeroing the sights became impossible. Under heavy fire, hands shook violently. Gloves slipped. Fingers missed. Flesh touched 500-degree steel. The smell hit you instantly. Burnt cloth and scorched human skin. Horrible burns put soldiers out permanently. The weapon literally maimed its own owners. Another nasty flaw hid in the latch. The locking lever caught on thick jungle brush. It yanked the barrel loose. The gun disassembled itself right on patrol. Sometimes the barrel stayed loosely attached. The lever just sat unlocked. The gunner noticed nothing. Until he squeezed the trigger tight. The gun failed to fire, right when someone shot at him. Mud and sweat made things much worse. Vietnam soaked everything in thick, wet grime. The weapon jammed without deep cleaning. A dirty receiver meant a dead gunner. Nobody volunteered for this specific job. The empty weapon weighed 23 pounds. The ammo belts added much more. The target on your back felt heavier, so command assigned it to newcomers. The greenest man carried the heaviest load. The weapon punished untrained hands hard. Veterans kept it clean and working. Rookies died trying to clear nasty jams. They called the machine total useless trash. The design demanded precise, careful handling. In close combat, panic killed precision. Men ripped at blazing hot steel. They burned their hands to the bone. Skin melted, flesh peeled, pain blinded. They dropped the parts in the mud. They died struggling with the jammed latch. The military issued a massive suppressive weapon, but left soldiers with zero handles for a safe grip. How did American engineers create this notoriously flawed piece of hardware? They simply took two captured German weapons and smashed them together. The concepts came straight off the Pentagon drafting boards right after World War II. American troops had just faced enemy firepower firsthand. The top brass wanted that exact capability. They wanted one single weapon to handle every combat role. No extra variants needed. The designers locked onto two specific guns, the MG-42 and the airborne FG-42. The MG-42 was a buzzsaw. It scared Allied troops. It cranked out up to 1,200 rounds per minute on the battlefield. That was exactly double the rate of fire the American M60 eventually managed to achieve. The FG-42 offered a different advantage. It was relatively compact. It brought better ergonomics for soldiers jumping out of planes. The military demanded a perfect hybrid. They wanted the heavy, sustained suppressive fire of the MG. They wanted the light portability of the FG. So the engineers compromised. They ignored the obvious flaws. They ripped the belt feed mechanism right out of the MG-42. They jammed it straight into the internal operating system of the FG-42. It was a messy, mechanical marriage. This new patchwork gun required a modern cartridge to feed its stolen internal mechanics. Technicians locked the heavy steel receiver. They racked the bolt backward. They chambered the new 7.62mm NATO round, 1,800 rounds. The machine gun squad divided this standard payload among themselves before stepping off the helicopter. The 7.62 NATO cartridge tore straight through tropical vines, but the crew paid the price with ruined backs. Every step through the foliage produced the heavy metallic clank of thousands of brass casings shifting inside their bags. The gunner hauled 300 rounds on his chest, with another 100 feeding directly into the weapon. His assistant managed the rest of the stockpile to keep the men alive. This ammunition fed a weapon designed to replace the aging Browning M1919. Engineers built the new M60 to fire from an open bolt at 600 rounds per minute. While that was half the speed of older German designs, the slower pace kept the weapon controllable. It prevented the crew from exhausting their entire supply in the first minutes of combat. Designers attached the folding bipod directly to the barrel, which looked practical only inside a clean testing facility. Carrying this firepower through deep vegetation revealed the physical cost of the design. The squad relied entirely on this gun as their primary source of suppressive firepower. Smaller 5.56 rifles simply deflected off the thick tree trunks. Manuals officially classified the machine gun as one of the lightest support weapons available. Hauling cold steel through deep mud told a very different story. 24 pounds without a single round. Army manuals demanded a dedicated three-man team to keep the weapon running. But deep on a combat patrol, the entire operational burden crashed onto the shoulders of just one guy. Regulations dictated those 1,800 rounds belonged to a perfectly coordinated squad formation. The thick canopy shredded that plan immediately. Early on, new arrivals draped heavy brass belts tied across their chests. They called it Pancho Villa style. It looked incredible on a news camera, but reality hit hard. Exposed rounds snagged on thorny vines, bent out of alignment, and dragged through deep, wet clay. That mud locked the weapon. The tray jammed instantly. It was a fatal flaw. Combat veterans quickly threw away the rulebook. They scavenged empty M18A1 bags. Originally issued to carry Claymore anti-personnel mines, this simple canvas pouch quickly became the most widespread makeshift ammo box in the entire theater. Other guys stripped the electronic guts out of heavy radio backpacks. They modified the rigid aluminum frames to haul pure brass instead of heavy batteries. A flexible metal chute ran straight to the gun receiver. Gunners fed 1,000 rounds in a continuous belt directly from the pack. A gunner desperately yanks a metal ammunition belt sideways, fighting to stop his own weapon from firing. Even a flawless backpack feed could not save the M60 from the heavy carbon fouling that turned it into an uncontrollable saw. The problem resided deep inside the gas cylinder, which lacked any sort of adjustable regulator to manage pressure. As carbon built up from continuous firing, the internal gas piston slowed down and failed to push the bolt far enough to lock back. This sluggish cycle triggered a terrifying malfunction known in the field as a runaway. The trigger remained untouched, yet the machine gun just kept cycling on its own. A continuous mechanical roar echoed through the jungle as the weapon completely lost its mind. At a cyclic rate of 600 rounds per minute, a jammed M60 chewed through a standard 100-round belt in exactly 10 seconds. To stop it, a soldier grabbed the feeding links, twisted them violently, and ripped the metal apart to cut the supply. Spent casings frequently stuck in the ejection port, requiring men to shove a rod down the barrel during a firefight. The push-button safety operated in the exact opposite direction of the standard-issue M16. That specific design flaw confused stressed infantrymen, who frequently switched between different weapons during ambushes. Fragile pistol grips cracked under heavy, sustained use, forcing troops to get creative with field repairs. Soldiers bent wire from standard coat hangers to build makeshift carrying handles. They even bolted empty C-ration cans to the receiver to guide the ammunition belt into the feed tray. Otherwise, the pig jammed. It broke when needed. In the 1960s, Marines flat out refused to touch it. Today, it sits in museums as the main symbol of that war. Despite runaway fire and burnt hands, the Pentagon shoved the M60 down the troops' throats. The U.S. Marine Corps hated the early models. Commanders pushed back hard against the switch. They preferred their old Browning automatic rifle, a heavy design from 1918. It only held 20 rounds, but it actually worked. The brass didn't care. Eventually, Washington forced every combat unit to adopt the new belt-fed gun. The grunts just had to adapt. They learned its quirks. They bled for its flaws. Years later, military engineers rolled out the E3 and E4 modifications. These upgrades finally fixed the worst gas system problems. But those fixes came way too late for the dirt. In the mud, soldiers fought with what they had. They had no choice. Administrative pressure turned a questionable piece of metal into a legend. Along with the M16 rifle and the Huey helicopter, the M60 became the defining symbol of the war.